here's my so I am the only one with Alex Smith over Kirk Cousins. I'm concerned. First off, Cousins is a slow starter, Mike. Look, 2015 QB 32 through the first 2 weeks. QB 24 in 2016, QB 23 in 2017. Again, first 2 weeks. He is a slow starter. He's a rhythm quarterback. And that was when he was in the same system, Jay Gruden's system, which he had known year after year after year. Now he's in Minnesota. New system, he has a new system, new teammates as well, obviously. And candidly, this is somebody coming as a Redskins fan, he struggles in the red zone. His red zone efficiency is terrible. And I like Kirk Cousins, and I'm happy. I like him personally. I thought he was a great quarterback for the Redskins. I'm happy that he got the money. I thought it was a good choice for Minnesota. But fantasy-wise, I'm a little concerned on him. I'm slightly lower. I have him at 12. You have him at 9.
Yeah, you mentioned all those concerns, including his struggles in the red zone. Still top 8 in fantasy each of the past 3 seasons. He's ranked no lower than 12th in pass attempts, 8th in completions, 10th in yards, 13th in touchdowns, 10th in completion percentage, and 11th in yards per attempt over those 3 seasons. So he has delivered efficiency, he's delivered volume, and also 13 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah,
only 2 guys have more.
I was going to say he's 3rd in rushing touchdowns. That's a great Kirk Cousins stats. No one knows that.
Cam and 100%.
Cam and Tyrod, the only guys with you'll win a couple of bar bets with that one.
Absolutely.
Like name quarterback, unless they watch the show, in which you'll lose the bar bet. But yeah, I mean, so he's definitely more mobile than he gets credit for. But here's a concern. Whatever. I'm at 12. I'm at 9. So there's not a huge difference here between us. But my concern is also the defense. Washington's defense has been putrid, right? So over the past 3 years, Cousins ranks 6th among quarterbacks in terms of fantasy points scored when trailing by at least 10 points. A lot of junk time scoring for Kirk Cousins. That's probably most likely not going to be a concern in Minnesota, where their defense is phenomenal. Last year, Minnesota 29th in plays when trailing by at least 10 points. They just didn't have a lot of plays when they were trailing by 10 points. They weren't trailing by 10 by a lot. So is that volume any part of a concern?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but on the other hand, too, we saw Blake Bortles be serviceable last year, or that offensive efficiency be terrific. They scored more points because that defense was so good. They were in scoring position more often. The field was shorter. I think that actually might be the case because I don't want to push the needle too far for too many defenses, but Jacksonville, Minnesota, potentially Houston, some of these extremely dominant defenses can make that. Can change that, get them into scoring position.
And that's a completely fair point, because that would always drive me crazy about for critics of Kirk Cousins. I was like, hey, can he get the ball on the 40 once? Kirk Cousins was always getting the ball on the 20, to your point, because teams were scoring and then they kick off or whatever, and he's getting on the 20, 25, as opposed to getting a couple of possessions where it's midfield, where it's on your own 40, because there's been a big stop. So that's fair, a shorter field, but I just don't see those big, and another argument in favor of Kirk Cousins, his weapons are better. Yeah. Like, I'm a big Redskins homer, but Stefon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, like, it's an improvement from what he had last year, or what he's had at most of the points of his Redskin career.
My biggest red flag, the O-line. We have to keep an eye on that. I'm sure we'll get to that in a second, talking about the next guy in our list.
We will. Well, let's bring in Stefania here and talk about Dalvin Cook. How are we feeling about Dalvin Cook?
Well, here's my concern.
Okay.
Is that obviously he's coming back from the ACL injury. We all know how great he looked last year. Really fun to watch. Very exciting player. And I think he has every reason. You have every reason to believe he can return to being that kind of player. But the fact is that he has not played in any of the preseason games. There's a chance, we don't know if he's going to play this week yet or not. Mike Zimmer not committing. And Dalvin Cook has even said he doesn't know if they'll let him play at all in the preseason. Now, we talk about a lot of different players coming back from ACL reconstruction, but it's particularly challenging for a running back because of the sharp deceleration, that need to move laterally quickly, all the high agility maneuvers that are demanded of you. And that's something that you need to practice and get comfortable with. Remember, his was an injury where it was that exact thing, plant and cut, and he went down. So I want to see him get those reps. And just historically, running backs have tended not to have similar metrics in their first year back from an ACL reconstruction. They tend to do better in the second year. There are outliers, but it's typically a slower start. So I don't have him quite as high as you all. I really want to see him in the preseason. Maybe that would change. But until I see it, I have some concern, because that's really the last stage of rehab, is getting into game action.
Mike, no concerns for you. You have him at running back 8.
Love him. Yeah. Speaking of bar bets, Todd Gurley was leading the NFL in rushing attempts through week 3 last season. Who was second? Dalvin Cook, 74, averaging just under 5 yards per carry. And by the way, after he went down last season, he was a top 10 fantasy running back when he went down. From week 5 on, Jerick McKinnon was 10th. Latavius Murray was 15th in fantasy points. They got so much out of that backfield, even with the suspect O-line. Aside injuries, once he's out there and he's healthy, I have no worries about him being a massive fantasy presence.
And you and I spoke to Mike Zimmer at the NFL Combine where we asked, hey, Latavius Murray really had a nice year last year. Is this going to be any kind of committee? And I think the quote was something to the effect of, no, the expectation is that Dalvin's going to get the majority of the work. Latavius Murray is a handcuff.
If he doesn't play at all in the preseason, I really question that he's going to go out and they're going to be like, yep, 4 quarters. Go at it. I think you have to, depending on when your draft is, and you're kind of rolling the dice right now, but you draft as late as possible, right? Because you want to see him in the game. You don't manage a player's workload so carefully and then go, okay, go do everything. It's just unusual. So I would, there's a little bit of more caution there for me, and I think you want to pay attention to what he does in the next couple weeks.
He is such a good pass catcher, though. That's the one thing. I'm super nervous about the offensive line, which is another reason why I'm slightly down on Cousins. But I think for Cook, it's mitigated because he is such a good pass catcher that there'll be different ways to get him in space that won't be as affected by an offensive line as it might be for somebody like Murray.
I think this time next year we'll be talking about him as a first-round pick.
That brings us
big upside.
That brings us to our Twitter poll. Will Dalvin Cook finish as a top 7 running back? I will say, Stephania, you're not, to your point, just Dalvin Cook's current ADP is running back 9, overall 13. So you're not getting to the middle of the second round without him still on your board. So if you're going to want him, you're going to have to take him early this year. Adam Thielen, Stefon Diggs, I don't know that there's much to talk about here. I'm at 11, you have him at 12. Is ADP is wide receiver 11. Everyone, all the rankers have Thielen over Diggs.
But not by much. I mean, even if you look at the numbers, they're really relatively close. I don't think we know exactly how it's going to play out. Stefon Diggs
I do. I know how it's going to play out. I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you exactly how it's going to play out.
Be quiet then.
Yeah, okay.
Please do.
Just listen and learn. Here we go. So Kirk Cousins loves throwing to the slot. Last 3 seasons of unqualified quarterbacks, second in terms of most yards attempt to the slot. Now, some of that obviously was because Crowder was one of the better wide receivers he had in Washington, but having watched a lot of Kirk Cousins, he does not like throwing outside the numbers. He likes throwing inside. Thielen, I think, is, obviously he played more slot last year than Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs is great, Stephania. Guy can't stay healthy. Injuries are always the concern with Diggs. That's why I have Thielen over Diggs.
Yes, and I actually would have Thielen over Diggs as well. He had a hip issue off and on that was giving him some trouble. Courtney Cronin, who covers the team for us, has been excellent about sort of reporting how that's affected him. But I say you don't know because they both have the potential to be these huge targets for Cousins, depending on where he wants to go. But I agree with you. I think he's more comfortable with the short passes across the middle.
But he is a very good deep ball thrower as well. I mean, you have Thielen over Diggs as well. Your thoughts on these two guys? But we both have them as you and I think the consensus rankers have Thielen and Diggs both top 20 at the position.
Yeah, I think they could support too. For the reasons we talked about already, they're going to throw up plenty. Cousins has been effective. I think they'll be fine. But this is the stat I kind of throw around when I compare these guys. They both played 16 games together last season, including the playoffs. Thielen was ahead in snaps, targets, routes, and fantasy points. He was just a more preferred target. Yes, it was a different quarterback. I think Diggs may have a higher ceiling. You've heard them comparisons like, could he be the next Antonio Brown? Could he make that big leap? I don't think he'll get that far, but I think he has a little bit of a higher ceiling. But Thielen's safer, high floor, like you said, good short area, mid-range target. I think he's a slightly better investment, but it's so close.
Yeah,
you can't go wrong.
And listen, and there will be weeks during the season where I'm sure we'll have Diggs ranked higher than Thielen. But for season long, give me the guy that's safe or give me the guy that doesn't have the injury concerns.